Hello.
I could feel their eyes on me, lingering longer than they should. The afternoon heat pressed against my skin like a promise as I stood there in my sundress, watching my husband Steve ignore me for the third hour straight. His friends Brian and Kevin had noticed what he couldn't or wouldn't. The way I shifted restlessly, the way my fingers traced the rim of my glass, the way I craved something more than this suburban routine. When Brian's hand brushed mine, reaching for a drink, the spark was undeniable. "Lisa," he murmured, his voice thick with intention. "You look like you need some attention." Kevin stepped closer, his presence warm against my back. I should have pulled away, should have remembered my vows. Instead, I let them guide me toward the garage, my pulse racing with anticipation and forbidden desire. Enjoyed that? Hit like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments what caught your attention. The barbecue smoke drifted lazily across our Houston backyard, carrying the scent of mesquite and something else, something electric that made my skin tingle. I adjusted the strap of my pale yellow sundress, feeling the fabric cling to my damp skin in the oppressive July heat. Steve stood hunched, over the grill like it was his shrine, beer in one hand, tongs in the other, completely absorbed in his ritual of char and flame. "Honey, do you need another beer?" I called out, though I already knew the answer. He'd grunt something non-committal, maybe wave me off and continue his sacred communion with the grill. 3 years of marriage, and I'd become background noise. To his weekends? "I'll get it," Brian offered, rising from the patio chair with fluid grace. At 40, he still moved like the college athlete he'd once been, all controlled power and easy confidence. His dark eyes met mine for just a beat longer than necessary as he passed. "Steve's pretty focused when he's cooking." Kevin chuckled from his spot in the shade, an ice-cold Corona sweating in his large hands. "Man's been perfecting that brisket recipe for 2 years. Nothing else exists when he's in the zone." His gaze followed the line of my bare legs as I shifted position. Good thing his friends know how to appreciate other things. Heat crawled up my neck that had nothing to do with the Texas sun. There was something different about today, something charged in the way they looked at me. Steve's buddies had always been friendly, but lately their attention felt more focused, more deliberate. Maybe it was the way marriage had settled into predictable patterns, or maybe it was how invisible I'd started feeling in my own home. "Lisa, you look incredible today," Brian said quietly, returning with 2 beers. He handed one to Kevin and kept one for himself, making no move to get Steve's drink. "That dress is perfect on you." I smoothed the fabric self-consciously, acutely, aware of how the light material showed every curve. "Thanks, I wasn't sure if it was too much for a backyard barbecue." "Definitely not too much." Kevin's voice was rougher now, his eyes tracking the movement of my hands. "If anything, it's not enough." The words hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. I felt my breath catch, a familiar ache starting low in my stomach. When was the last time someone had looked at me like that? When was the last time Steve had even noticed what I was wearing? "You guys are terrible," I laughed, but it came out breathless. "I should probably check on the salad." "Stay," Brian said, reaching out to touch my wrist gently. His fingers were warm against my pulse point. "Steve's got everything under control. Besides, we barely get to talk to you when he's around." That was true. Whenever the 3 of them got together, I became part of the scenery, bringing drinks, setting up food, cleaning up afterward. The dutiful wife playing hostess while they relived their glory days and complained about work. "What would you like to talk about?" I asked, settling back into my chair, hyper-aware of how the dress rode up slightly on my thighs. Kevin leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "How about what you want, Lisa? What makes you happy?" The question caught me off guard. I don't know. I mean, the usual things, I guess." "That's not an answer," Brian said softly. "When's the last time you did something just for you? Something that made you feel alive?" I stared at him, my mouth suddenly dry. "Why are you asking me this?" "Because," Kevin said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper, "we can see it in your eyes. You're hungry for something more." My heart hammered against my ribs. This was dangerous territory, but I couldn't bring myself to shut it down. Instead, I found myself leaning closer, drawn in by their intensity. "You think you know what I want?" The challenge slipped out before I could stop it. Brian's smile was slow, predatory. "I think you want to feel desired, really desired, not taken for granted. I think you want someone to pay attention to every little thing about you," Kevin added, his gaze sliding down my body like a caress. "To notice when you wear something special, to appreciate the effort you put in." My breathing had gone shallow. "Steve appreciates me, does he?" Brian asked gently. "When's the last time he told you how beautiful you are? When's the last time he looked at you the way we're looking at you right now?" I couldn't answer because I couldn't remember. Steve was a good man, a provider, reliable and steady, But somewhere along the way, he'd stopped seeing me as anything more than a comfortable fixture in his life. "You deserve better," Kevin said firmly. "You deserve to be worshipped." The word sent a shiver through me despite the heat. I glanced over at Steve, still absorbed in his grilling, then back at the two men who were looking at me like I was the most fascinating thing in the world. "This is crazy," I whispered. "Is it?" Brian reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, his fingers lingering against my skin. "Or is it the first real conversation you've had in months?" He was right. And that realization hit me like a physical blow. When was the last time I'd felt this engaged, this present in my own life? "Come on." Kevin stood up, extending his hand. "Let's get out of this heat. The garage is cooler." I looked at his outstretched hand, knowing that taking it would change everything. Steve was 20 feet away, focused on his brisket, completely unaware that his wife was balanced on the edge of a cliff. "Lisa," Brian's voice was soft but insistent. "You don't have to be invisible anymore." I took Kevin's hand. The garage was indeed cooler, the concrete floor a relief under my sandaled feet. But the temperature drop did nothing to calm the heat, building inside me. Brian closed the door behind us. Not all the way, but enough to give us privacy while still maintaining the illusion of innocence. "Better?" Kevin asked, but he was standing closer now, close enough that I could smell his cologne, mixed with the faint scent of beer and summer heat. "Much," I managed, though my voice sounded strange to my own ears. Brian moved to the workbench, leaning against it with casual confidence. "So tell us, Lisa, what's something you've always wanted to try but never had the chance?" The question was loaded, and we all knew it. I found myself thinking of all the fantasies I'd pushed down over the years, all the desires I'd labeled inappropriate or unrealistic. I started, then stopped, shaking my head. "I can't say that." "Why not?" Kevin asked, moving closer still. "It's just us. No judgment here." I looked between them, these two men who had been nothing more than Steve's drinking buddies an hour ago, and felt something wild and reckless unfurling in my chest. "I've always wondered," I said slowly, "what it would be like to be with someone who actually paid attention, who noticed everything, who made me feel like I was the only person in the world. Like this?" Brian asked, and suddenly he was behind me, his hands settling lightly on my shoulders. "Like having someone notice that you're trembling right now, even though it's 90 degrees outside?" I was trembling, my whole body vibrating with tension and desire. Kevin stepped in front of me, so close I could feel his breath on my face. "Like having someone notice that your pupils are dilated," he murmured, his eyes locked on mine. "That your lips are parted, that you want this just as much as we do." "Kevin," I breathed, his name a whisper of surrender. "Say yes, Lisa." Brian's voice was warm against my ear, his hands moving slowly down my arms. "Say yes to feeling alive again." I could hear Steve outside, laughing at something on his phone, completely oblivious to the seismic shift happening 20 feet away. The rational part of my mind screamed warnings, but it was completely drowned out by the roar of blood in my ears. "Yes," I whispered. The word had barely left my lips when Kevin's hands cupped my face, his thumbs tracing my cheekbones with reverent gentleness. "You're so beautiful," he said, and I could hear the sincerity in his voice. So damn beautiful. Brian's hands found my waist, his touch firm but careful as if I were something precious. "We're going to take care of you," he promised against my neck. "We're going to make you feel exactly how special you are." When Kevin kissed me, it was nothing like the perfunctory pecks Steve and I exchanged. This was hungry, desperate, like he'd been dying for the taste of me. I melted into him, my hands fisting in his shirt as I kissed him back with equal fervor. Brian's lips found the sensitive spot where my neck met my shoulder, and I gasped into Kevin's mouth. The sound seemed to unleash something in both of them. Kevin's hands tangled in my hair while Brian's roamed the curves of my body through the thin fabric of my dress. "God, you're responsive," Brian murmured appreciatively. "Does Steve know how lucky he is?" I couldn't answer because Kevin was kissing me again, deeper this time, his tongue exploring my mouth like he was mapping new territory. When we finally broke apart, I was breathing hard, my whole body alive with sensation. "We should go somewhere more private," Kevin said, his voice rough with desire. "Somewhere we can really appreciate you properly." I nodded, beyond words, beyond rational thought. All I knew was that I needed more of this feeling, more of being the center of someone's universe. Brian took my hand, leading me toward the back of the garage where an old couch sat covered with a paint-splattered tarp. Kevin pulled the tarp away, revealing worn but clean cushions. "Not exactly the Ritz," Brian said with a self-deprecating smile, "but it'll do." "It's perfect," I assured him, and meant it. The setting didn't matter. What mattered was the way they were looking at me, like I was a goddess they intended to worship. Kevin sat down first, pulling me onto his lap so I was straddling him. The position made my dress ride up, and I felt exposed, vulnerable, but also powerful. His hands settled on my thighs, his thumbs drawing small circles on my skin. "Is this okay?" he asked, always checking, always making sure I was comfortable. "More than okay," I breathed, rolling my hips slightly and watching his eyes go dark. Brian settled beside us, his hand trailing up my spine to the zipper of my dress. "Can I?" he asked softly. I nodded and felt the whisper of cool air as he slowly pulled the zipper down. The dress fell forward, pooling at my waist, leaving me exposed in just my lace bra. "Jesus," Kevin breathed, his hands reverently tracing the curves of my waist. "You're perfect." Brian's fingers were at the clasp of my bra, and I arched my back to give him access. When the garment fell away, both men went still for a moment, just looking at me. "Beautiful," Brian whispered, his hand cupping me gently. "So beautiful." The praise went straight to my core, making me ache with need. When Kevin leaned forward to press his lips to my skin, I gasped, my head falling back. "That's it," he murmured against me. "Let us take care of you." Brian's mouth joined Kevin's, and I was lost in sensation, in the feeling of being completely, utterly cherished. Their hands and lips mapped every inch of me, finding sensitive spots I'd forgotten I had. When Kevin's hand slipped between my thighs, I cried out softly, my body arching into his touch. He found me ready, eager, and his fingers moved with practiced skill. "So wet," he marveled, "so ready for us." "Please," I whispered, not even sure what I was begging for, just knowing I needed more. Brian's lips found mine again as Kevin's fingers worked their magic, building me higher and higher until I was teetering on the edge of something explosive. "Let go," Kevin commanded softly. "Let go for us, Lisa." When I finally shattered, it was with a cry that I barely managed to muffle against Brian's shoulder. Waves of pleasure crashed over me, more intense than anything I'd felt in years, but they weren't done with me. As I came down from my high, they positioned me between them on the couch, Kevin behind me and Brian in front. I could feel the solid warmth of their bodies pressing against me, could hear their ragged breathing in my ears. "We want you," Brian said simply. "Both of us. Together. If you'll have us." The suggestion sent a fresh wave of heat through me. I'd never been with two men before, had never even imagined it, but the idea was intoxicating. "Yes," I said without hesitation. "Yes, I want that." They moved with careful coordination, making sure I was comfortable, that I was ready. When Kevin pressed into me from behind, I gasped at the unfamiliar sensation, but Brian's hands and lips distracted me, soothing, and exciting me in equal measure. "Breathe," Kevin murmured in my ear. "Just breathe and let us love you." When Brian joined us, filling me completely, I thought I might shatter from the intensity. They moved together, finding a rhythm that drove me wild, their hands and mouths never leaving my skin. "So good," Brian groaned. "So tight, so perfect." "Made for this," Kevin agreed, his voice strained with control. "Made for us." They built me up again, slowly this time, savoring every moment. When I finally peaked again, it was with both of them, all three of us crying out together in perfect harmony. Afterward, we lay tangled together on the couch, skin damp with sweat, hearts slowly returning to normal. I felt boneless, completely satisfied in a way I'd forgotten was possible. That was... I started, then trailed off, unable to find words. "Incredible," Brian finished for me, pressing a soft kiss to my shoulder. "Long overdue," Kevin added, his arm tightening around my waist. Reality began to creep back in slowly. Outside, I could hear Steve calling my name, probably wondering where I'd disappeared to. I began, but Kevin's hand on my hip stopped me. "Not yet," he said quietly. "Give us another minute to memorize this." I understood what he meant. This moment, this feeling, it couldn't last. Soon I'd have to put my dress back on, fix my hair, and pretend that nothing had changed. But something fundamental had shifted inside me, and I wasn't sure I could go back to being invisible. Brian helped me back into my dress, his fingers gentle as he zipped me up. Kevin found my shoes, kneeling to slip them onto my feet like I was Cinderella, Lisa! Steve's voice was closer now, and we could hear his footsteps approaching the garage. "Coming!" I called back, my voice sounding remarkably normal given what had just happened. Brian caught my hand as I moved toward the door. "This doesn't have to be a one-time thing," he said quietly. "If you want more, we want more too." Kevin nodded, in agreement. "You deserve to feel like this all the time, cherished, desired." Before I could respond, Steve appeared in the doorway, his face flushed from the heat and beer. "There you are," he said, barely glancing at me. "I've been looking. Everywhere, the brisket's almost ready. His eyes swept over his friends without suspicion. You guys hiding out in here? It's hot as hell. Just needed to cool off, Kevin said smoothly. Lisa was feeling a bit overheated. Yeah, well, next time turn on the fan, Steve said with mild irritation. Come on, food's ready. As we walked back to the patio, I felt transformed, like I was wearing a secret that made me glow from within. The afternoon continued as if nothing had happened, but every time Brian or Kevin looked at me, I felt that familiar heat stir in my core. When they finally left that evening, Brian slipped a piece of paper into my hand as he hugged me goodbye. Call me, he whispered in my ear, when you're ready for more. That night, as I lay in bed next to Steve, listening to him snore, I thought about the paper hidden in my purse, about the way it felt to be truly seen, truly desired, about the promise of more. I'd spent 3 years being a good wife, putting my needs aside, making myself smaller and smaller until I'd nearly disappeared. But today had reminded me that I was still here, still alive, still capable of passion and desire. The question was, what was I going to do about it? Some secrets change everything, don't they? If you were in my position, would you have walked away or given in to temptation? Have you ever felt invisible in your own life? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one and I want to know your story. Don't forget to hit like if this resonated with you, and subscribe for more intimate confessions. Turn on notifications because, trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. Thanks for listening to my story. See you soon.
Bye-bye.